Welcome back to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter John Steppe. I am joined this week by one of my Gazette colleagues. I love to get the opposing beat writers' perspectives on these, and usually I have to look to another newspaper to do that. But with Cy-Hawk Week, I am pleased to welcome Rob Gray onto the podcast.
Hi, John. Great to join you.
Yes. So Southeast Missouri State probably can't take too much away from that game, but what were your overall takeaways of what this 2022 Cyclones team, what they could be?
Well, I think the fact that they came out and wanted to get Hunter Deckers established right away in the first half, having him make an array of throws and almost all of which he was able to complete and look good while doing so. Do I read into? I don't want to read into that too much, but I think this offense could be built to be a little bit more pass heavy than they have been in the past. And I think they feel that Deckers has the arm and the composure, even though it was his first opening game start and first start period. And just got his feet wet against Iowa last season, a handful of games. They're really high on him. And then when you got a guy like Xavier Hutchinson and you sprinkle in Jalen Noel, they think they're going to get more out of tight end despite losing Charlie Kohler and Chase Allen, with an Easton Dean and Deshaun Hanika scored his first touchdown. He'd been banged up, so mostly a special teams guy. I think they feel like they got a lot of weapons. And obviously against Iowa, one thing that Hawkeyes always do is clamp down on the run. And one thing that they're sometimes vulnerable to is an offense that's going to try to stretch the field and use every inch of the field against them, against their linebackers and secondary. So we'll see how that plays out on Saturday. But seeing Iowa State try to do that early and often with Deckers and then establish the run in the second half against, probably middling at best FCS program in Southeast Missouri State. I don't know. Is it a harbinger of what's to come Saturday and beyond? They certainly gave fans something to think about.
Oh, yeah. And I think Purdue kind of creeps into Iowa fans' minds when you're hearing about, pass-heavy offense. And David Bell obviously had a field day last year at Kinnick. And you look at the way that South Dakota State played, they really had a hard time establishing the run, and they've been historically a run-first team. So interesting to see. Maybe this could be a little more of a difficult matchup here for Iowa's defense. Well, it should be a more difficult matchup than an FCS South Dakota State team, but that'll be interesting to see. What have you noticed kind of on the defensive side of things?
They really didn't try to do a whole lot other than prevent a lot of scoring from the Red Hawks. I mean, the pass rush was there, but they didn't have a sack. They had 3 tackles for loss, which is very low, very, very, very low for them. Will McDonald didn't play a whole lot of snaps. They worked a lot of 2 deep, 3 deep guys in there. Continued to rush 3 pretty much all day. They didn't show a whole lot. I think it was important for them to work a lot of guys in. They've said all fall camp that the number 1 and 2 corners on each side are pretty much interchangeable in terms of starting potential, and they played all 4 of them a ton, and then we're able to work in younger guys and newer guys there as well. And I think it was very much can defense be vanilla? I mean, it was kind of we don't know what we're going to have, but I mean, when you return the likes of Orion Vance with his experience at Mike or middle linebacker, and Anthony Johnson moves from cornerback to basically your quarterback safety, and you got Will McDonald coming back and Isaiah Lee, and they're high on a lot of the guys in that defense. I mean, they should still be a pretty solid unit. Sometimes you can throw out what each team is when the Cy-Hawk game rolls around. But to recap, didn't see a whole lot, but based on track record and how they feel about the guys they've got, they should be pretty strong at each level of the defense.
A nice luxury to be able to not have all of your first teamers in for all of week 1, something Iowa didn't quite experience last week. Interesting too, Will McDonald, if he's maybe a little more rested, that could be an interesting matchup against a questionable Iowa offensive line.
Yeah, and I think, they've always obviously always got talent, but it feels like they usually have a little bit more experience as well on the offensive line, the Hawkeyes. So, we'll see what happens. Does Iowa State decide to really bring pressure on Petrus, and try to get him to make mistakes, given what he's done in his past 7 games with the 1 touchdown and 8 interceptions? I mean, that would seem like something they'd want to do, but at the same time, they know how much Iowa wants to establish the run. That's very much their offensive identity. And based on what's been happening in the passing game, it probably has to be, at least until they get some more guys back. They might take that approach, but I think from a fan's perspective, an Iowa State fans perspective, they definitely like to see them mix in a variety of pressures to see if they can, for once, force a turnover against the Iowa offense.
And it's interesting that you bring up the turnovers, because obviously that was a specialty for Iowa last season, leading the FBS in interceptions, but lost the turnover battle against South Dakota State -2. And that's really something that Kirk Ferentz highlighted, that clearly they don't, that's a more of a sign of concern, it seemed, than maybe some of the other startling offensive statistics for them. So we'll see what happens in the turnover battle there.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa to be 9-0 on this 5-game win streak. I defy anyone to find probably many major college football teams that have gone 5 straight meetings with an annual opponent without turning the ball over once. I mean, that's just a jaw-dropping, mind-boggling, head-spinning, unbelievable sort of stat. And you figure at some point that's going to reverse itself. But I mean, it's a function of the way Iowa plays defense, though, in terms of getting the takeaways. They sit back. Iowa State does the same thing, but not always as well. You'll let teams drive it a little bit, knowing that you're going to make them make a mistake, whether it's a penalty that makes them punt, whether it's a turnover that, despite a good drive, it fizzles out. So, kudos to Iowa for being able to play that clean. I mean, Iowa State has had some opportunities in those 5 games, things ricocheting off 2 guys, possible interceptions. And Iowa's find, Brees Hall, who fumbled maybe twice in his Iowa State career, gives the Hawkeyes a scoop and score, a defensive touchdown in last year's meeting. So there's always a sense of the unexpected coming to the fore in this game, and I'm sure that'll be the case again on Saturday. And it'll be interesting to see if Iowa State can finally, again, at least pull even in the turnover battle, and have a bit of a better chance.
Now, is the streak something that Iowa State players are really aware of, or is it kind of just another game for them?
Well, they're aware of it, and certainly the turnover thing. Anthony Johnson was interviewed yesterday, and he was very close to the vest. Anthony is a very engaging and good talker. He was very succinct. Curt, it might not be the right word, because it kind of intimates that maybe it's a little bit, I don't know, not nice. Mm-hmm. He just was very matter of fact. And they mentioned the turnover thing, and all he said was, "We're aware." And the streak is obviously they're aware of too, but obviously they're going to say, all the cliches. We're treating it like every other game, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to some degree, you sort of have to do that. But there's no doubt it would mean a lot to them. The one team that Iowa State plays each season that Coach Matt Campbell hasn't beaten. I mean, from a symbolic standpoint and from this season standpoint, it would be a huge win for Iowa State, with Ohio as their last non-conference game, and then boom, right into the Big 12 with defending Big Conference champion Baylor. So if they could somehow get out of the gate 2-0, that enhances a lot of things, streak or no streak.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is that really would not be a bad position for them to be in. And Iowa, on the flip side, if they win this game, it's reasonable with Nevada on deck, and then on the road at Rutgers after that. It's reasonable to expect that a 4-0 Iowa team is possible if they can get past this game. But of course, it's a little easier said than done with the current quarterback situation. So It should be a great environment, though.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State is doing we'll simulate crowd noise throughout practice and all of that. I mean, I know that Kinnick is always very loud, especially for this game or a big any Big Ten game matchup, whether it be Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan State, and all that. But how much can you can't simulate it. So all the guys who are somewhat new to the program that took some positive strides, kind of showed Campbell and his staff what they can do when the quote unquote lights come on, even though it's the middle of the afternoon against Southeast Missouri State. They're going to have to do it on a whole different level there in Iowa City on Saturday. And that's, another proving ground. Can they prevent themselves getting rattled? And that's a big if until you really face that type of environment. So same goes for Hunter Deckers. Yes, he came in and passed for 114 yards and a touchdown when Brock Purdy struggled again as a senior in last year's Iowa win. So he's got experience, but that's of course in the friendly confines of Jack Trice Stadium, not Kinnick Stadium. So a lot of question marks still for week 2, and so many opportunities for both teams, but obviously both teams with varying different question marks to some extent.
Oh yeah. It was funny when I was covering the combine back in, that was early March. I was thinking, man, they're like losing practically the whole team, it felt like. And there now you start to see who those new faces, obviously some exceptions like Xavier Hutchinson, Will McDonald, but now you're starting to see that next wave of players here that can kind of usher in the next era of Iowa State, Iowa games.
Yeah, well, what Iowa State hopes, what Campbell hopes, is they've established themselves as the baseline is they're a winning program, that they can go 7-5 in the regular season. Last season, a lot of self-inflicted wounds in the worst possible moments, a couple of really bad breaks, bad luck situations. That's all they were able to do in the regular season. And then, of course, a 7-point loss to number 14 Clemson in that bowl down in Orlando. So it's the recruiting class rankings have kept going up each season with Campbell and his staff. So I feel that he and his assistants have always felt confident that they will have the talent to make up for the loss of the Greg Eisworths, Craig McDonald, I seem young to the transfer portal, Mike Rose, Jake Hummel, Eni Wazarike, on down the line and offensively, Breece Hall, of course, Brock Purdy winning his quarterback. It's dizzying to think about all that they lost. But then when you look at each level on both sides of the ball, Trevor Downing moves from guard to center, their best offensive lineman. Jirel Brock was as highly rated, 4-star like Breece Hall when he came in the same class. And so it's his turn now. And if you're a good program, you do just and with a few good breaks and a little bit better execution, this could be a big surprise year for them. But it's also going to be a big prove it year in terms of have they really set the program at a standard that's never come close to reaching, which is sustained success. It measured by winning seasons over. Now it's 5 straight seasons. Can it be a 6th?
And then still fairly early in the game week process here as we record this, but any score prediction you have yet?
I don't think I'm ready for that yet. I think it's 3 points either way. I mean, I think it's a toss-up kind of game. If Iowa State continues to stumble, if Torrey Taylor can again dictate field position. I mean, he was the MVP of that game last season, I think. Then it's going to be really difficult, because then Hunter Deckers in his first start at Kinnick Stadium is facing long fields all the time, and Iowa's defense is going to be a little bit more opportunistic then. And do you press? Do you Downing stressed that also he was pretty matter of fact and not long winded. Just said we've got to make the quarterback comfortable. Brock Purdy was uncomfortable all of the game last season, and if they can do that, if they can keep Hunter Deckers relatively clean, especially early on, and maybe they can go down and score, that's going to make a huge difference. But that's a big if. And I mean, if they continue to turn the ball over, if they shank punts, miss field goals. I mean, there's lots of things that have gone wrong for them a lot of times on special teams. Then it easily goes the other way. But I think in terms of strengths, each team's strengths, it makes an interesting jigsaw puzzle of a game. And now that I say I think it'll be close and low scoring, watch it be crazy and one team wins by a couple touchdowns. But it just seems on paper that that's what is destined to be a slog of a game.
Now, I don't have much credibility from week one after I thought that Iowa, South Dakota State was going to be 28-17. A little off on that one by, 21 points on one side and 14 on the other.
Oh, yeah. 14.
So just a bit off. But yeah, I'm at the same boat as you here with field goal game. I'm doing this at my own risk because I still have to do grocery shopping and be in public in Iowa City as I say this. But right now I'm thinking Iowa State 13, Iowa 10. I think the offensive struggles are something that it's a pretty big red flag, and you don't really see the obvious solutions where you usually don't have a quarterback who has significant fundamental problems in week one. All of a sudden just solve them in week two, ta-da, after having months to work on it. But you never know. As you mentioned with Deckers, if he doesn't get comfortable, if you have maybe a false start situation like South Dakota State had, the field position game is big. And Tory Taylor showed that. You mentioned last year's Cyhawk game and showed it again in week one with the 10 punts for, 471 yards or something, almost 3 times as many yards as Iowa's offense had. So
and 7 inside the 20.
Only here in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, and 7 inside the 20 too. So I mean, who, by the way, just as an aside, who is considered the Big 12's best punter? Because I saw he's preseason second team All Big Ten.
Let's see. Oh, it's Adam. I'm gonna mispronounce his last name. Corsic at Rutgers.
I just find it hard to believe he's better than Tory Taylor, but I mean, okay, that the people who are cover the league must know, and he must be put up phenomenal numbers too. But I know for Iowa State fans, the name Tory Taylor strikes fear into their hearts, and for good reason.
Oh yeah. And it'll be a great punting matchup in a couple weeks between Iowa and Rutgers. And Rutgers, I think, was the only team to send a punter to Big Ten Media Days. So maybe we'll see that next year, Tory Taylor, with his current trajectory. And it's also Tory Taylor's first game that his family will be at since he came to Iowa. So in case Iowa State fans weren't dreading it enough, this game has even more meaning for him. So
yeah, that's not. I'm sure that's not very comforting to the fans in the Cardinal and gold. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's funny hearing him talk about his family experiencing San Francisco and then Vegas. So if that's not a cultural awakening, Las Vegas, I don't know what is.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Rob, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, good to talk to you, John. And we'll look forward to seeing you on Saturday and to see how our predictions will obviously be solidified and put in the Gazette in print. So we'll be held to them. And we'll probably both be wildly wrong. And that's just kind of the nature of this game. But certainly a fun week. Certainly a great week for fans of both teams in this state. And again, I hope everyone just tries to enjoy it and not get too combative with one another.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning into another episode of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. We'll be back with another episode after the game and then again next week. Until then, we will talk Hawks later.